autumn leaves, lie strewn around me here. Autumn leaves, how sad, how cold, how drear. How like the hopes of childhood's day, the clustering on the bough. How like those hopes in their decay, how faded are they now. Autumn leaves, lie strewn around me here. Autumn leaves, how sad, how cold, how drear. Vivid leaves, what lie before the girl. Vivid leaves, ye tell a mournful tale of love once true and friends once kind, and happy moments fled, dispensed by every breath of wind, forgotten, changed, or dead. Autumn leaves, lie strewn around me here. Autumn leaves, how sad, how cold, how drear.
Ирина Машинистова, муниципальное общеобразовательное учреждение города Горловки, гимназия номер 65 «Триумф», 8 класс.
A Christmas Carol by Чарльза Диккенса. He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the window, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. "Nice girl, very." "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He is in the dining room, sir, alone with Mr. Smith." "I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank you, he knows me," said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in the great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points and like to see that everything is right. "Fred," said Scrooge, "dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started." Scrooge had forgotten, for the moment, about her sitting in the corner with his footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Let him in. It is a mercy. He didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful anonymity, wonderful happiness."
Сытенко Маргарита, МОУ города Горловки, школа номер 50, 8 класс, отрывок из произведения Чарльза Диккенса «Рождественская песня». It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in and putting her arms about his neck and often kissed him, addressed him as her. "I have to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, and clapping her tiny hands and bending down to love. "To bring you home, home, home." "Home, little friend," returned the boy. "Yes," said the child, brimful of glee. "Home, for good and all. Home, forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be that home is like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed, that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. And you are to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes, and are never to come back here, but first we are to be together all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. You are a quiet woman, little fan, exclaimed the boy. She clapped her hands and laughed, and tried to touch his head, but being too little laughed again, and stood on to tiptoe to embrace him.
Негритянова Ксения, моего города Горловки, школа номер 50, 10 класс, отрывок из произведения «Рождественская песня» Чарльза Диккенса. Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You are poor enough? Come then, returned the nephew gaily. What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You are rich enough. Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spot this moment, said, back again, and followed up with humbug. Don't be cross, uncle, said the nephew. What else can I be, returned the uncle sternly, when I live in such world of fool as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What Christmas time to you, but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer, a time for finding yourself, a time for balancing your books and every even item and names around a dozen of months presented date against you. If I could rock my wheels, said Scrooge indignantly, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and bullied with a stake of holes through his heart. He should. Uncle, pleaded the nephew. Nephew, returned the uncle sternly, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. Keep it, repeated Scrooge's nephew. But you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then, said Scrooge. Much good may it do you, much good it has ever done you. Then.
Я, Ященко Алевтина, учащаяся 10 класса муниципального общеобразовательного учреждения школы номер 144 города Донецка, буду читать отрывок из произведения Чарльза Диккенса «Рождественские истории». The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them were changed like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might be guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below, upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist, or mist enshrouded them, he couldn't tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable, and being, from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant.
Now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, during his whole residence in that place. Also, the Scrooge had as a little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including which is a bold word the corporation, alderman, and livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon, and that let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the locker of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not in impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked as Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath of hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face, and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again.
A Christmas Carol by Chарльzа Dickensa. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light that shone out of ghosts of Christmas past. "It matters little," she said softly, "to you very little. Another idol has displaced me. And if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve." "What idol has displaced you?" he rejoined. "A golden one. This is the even-handed dealing of the world," he said. "There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth."
Чучук Виктория, обучающаяся 9 класса муниципального бюджетного общеобразовательного учреждения Марьяновская школа, администрации Старобешевского района. Отрывок из произведения Чарльза Диккенса «Большие надежды». My sister, Mrs. Joe Gadgery, was more than 20 years old than I and had established a great reputation with herself and the neighbors because she had brought me up by hand, having at the time to find out for myself what the expression meant, and knowing her to have a hot and heavy hand and to be much in the habit of laying it upon her husband as well as upon me. I supposed that Joe Gadgery and I were both brought up by hand. She was not a good-looking woman, my sister, and I had a general impression that she must have made Joe Gadgery marry her by hand. Joe was a fair man with curls of flaxen hair on each side of his smooth face and with eyes of such a very undecided blue that they seemed to have somehow got mixed with their own whites. He was a mild, good-natured, sweet-tempered, easy-going, foolish, dear fellow, a sort of Hercules in strength and also in weakness. My sister, Mrs. Joe, with black hair and eyes, had such a prevailing redness of skin that I sometimes used to wonder whether it was possible She washed herself with a nutmeg grater instead of soap. She was tall and bony and almost always wore a coarse apron, fastened over her figure, behind with two loops, and having a square impregnable bib in front that the stuck full of pins and needles. She made it a powerful merit in herself and a strong reproach against Joe that she wore this apron so much. So I really see no reason why she should have worn it at all, or why, if she did wear it at all, she should not have taken it off every day of her life.
You say nothing of her, remarked Miss Havisham to me, as she looked on. She says many hard things of you, but you say nothing of her. What do you think of her? I don't like to say, I stamped. Tell me in my ear, said Miss Havisham, bending down. I think she's very proud. I replied, in a whisper. Anything else? I think she's very pretty. Anything else? I think she's very insulting. She was looking at me then with a look of supreme everything. Anything else? I think I should like to go home and never see her again, though she's so pretty. I am not sure that I shouldn't like to see her again, but I should like to go home now. You shall go soon, said Miss Havisham aloud. Play the game out. Saving for the one where it smiled first, I should have felt almost sure that Miss Havisham's face couldn't smile. It had dropped into a watchful and brooding expression. Most likely then all the things about her had become transfixed, and it looked as if nothing could ever lift it up again. Her chest had dropped, so that she stopped, and her voice had dropped, so that she spoke low and with a dead lull about her. Altogether, she had the appearance of having dropped, body and soul, within and without, under the weight of a crushing blow. I played the game to end the end with a Stella.
King Watkins the First, I believe, said the old lady. Watkins, replied the king, is my name. Papa, if I'm not mistaken, of a beautiful Princess Alicia, said the old lady. And of 18 other darlings, replied the king. Listen, you are going to the office, said the old lady. It instantly flashed upon the king that he must be a fairy, or how could she know that? You're right, said the old lady, answered his thoughts. I am a good fairy grandmarina. Attend. When you return home to dinner, politely invite the Princess Alicia to have some of the salmon that you bought just now. It may disagree with her, answered the king. The old lady became so angry at this absurd idea that the king was quite alarmed and humbly begged her pardon. We hear a great deal too much about this thing disagreeing and that thing disagreeing, said the old lady with the greatest contempt it was possible to express. Don't be greedy. I think you want it all to yourself. The king hung his head under this reproof and said he wouldn't talk about these things disagreeing anymore. Be good then, said the fairy grandmother, and don't. When the beautiful Princess Alicia consents to placate his salmon, and I think she will, you will find that she will leave a fishbone on her plate. Tell her to dry it and to rub it and to polish until it shines like a mother of pearls, and take care of it as a present from me. Is that all? asked the king. Don't be impatient, sir, returned the fairy grandmarina, loading his heavily. Don't catch the people short before they have done speaking. just the way with a grown-up person. You're always doing it. The king again hung his head and said he wouldn't do so any more. Be good then, said the fairy Grand Marina, and don't. Tell the Princess Alicia, with my life, that the fishbone is a magic present from me, which can only be used once, and it will bring her that once whatever she wished for, provided she wished for it at the right time. That's the message. Take care of it.
The king then sighed so heavily, and seemed so low-spirited, and sat down so miserably, leaning his head upon his hand and his elbow upon the kitchen table, pushed away in the corner, that the 17 princes and princesses crept softly out of the kitchen, and left him alone with the Princess Alicia and the angelic baby. "What is the matter, Papa?" "I am dreadfully poor, my child." "Have you no money at all, Papa?" "None, my child." "Is there no way left of getting any, Papa?" "No way," said the king. "I have tried very hard, and I have tried all ways." When she heard those last words, the Princess Alicia began to put her hand into the pocket where she kept the magic fishbone. "Papa," said she, "when we have tried very hard and tried all ways, we must have done our very, very best." "No doubt, Alicia." "When we have done our very, very best, Papa, and that is not enough, then I think the right time must have come for asking help of others." This was the very secret connected with the magic fishbone, which she had found out for herself from the good fairy Grandmarina's words, and which she so often whispered to her beautiful and fashionable friend the Duchess. So she took out of her pocket the magic fishbone that had been dried and rubbed and polished till it shone like mother of pearl, and she gave it one little kiss, and wished it was quarter day. And immediately it was quarter day. The king's quarter salary came rattling down the chimney and bounced into the middle of the floor.
There was once a child, and he strolled about a good deal, and thought of a number of things. He had a sister, who was a child too, and his constant companion. These two used to wander all day long. They wondered at the beauty of the flowers. They wondered of the height and blueness of the sky. They wondered at the depths of a bright water. They wondered at the goodness and the power of God, who made a lovely world. They used to say to one another, sometimes, supposing all the children upon earth were to die, would the flowers and the water and the sky be sorry? They believed they would be sorry, for, said they, the buds are the children of the flowers, and the little playful streams that gambol down the hillsides are the children of the water, and the smallest bright specks playing at the high and seek in the sky all night must surely be the children of the stars, and they would all the grieved to see their playmates, the children of men no more. There was one clear shining star that used to come out in the sky before the rest, near the church spire above the graves. It was larger and more beautiful, they thought, than all the others, and every night they watched for it, standing hand in hand at a window. Whoever saw it first cried out, "I see the star!" And often they cried out both together, knowing so well when it would rise and where. So they grew to be such friends with it that before lying down in their beds, they always looked out once again to bid it good night, and when they were turning round to sleep, they used to say,
God bless the star. But while she was still very young, very, very young, the sister drooped and came to be so weak that she could no longer stand in the window at night. And then a smile would come upon the face, and a little weak voice used to say, God bless my brother and the star.
I come into the second best parlor after breakfast with my book and an exercise book and a slate. My mother is ready for me at her writing desk, but not half so ready as Mr. Marston in his easy chair by the window, though he pretends to be reading a book, or Mrs. Marston sitting near my mother, stringing steel beads. The very sight of this stool has such an influence over me that I begin to feel the words I have at infinite pains to get into my head, all sliding away and going I don't know where. I wonder where they do go by the by. I hand the first book to my mother. Perhaps it's grammar, perhaps history or geography. I take last drawing, look at the page as I give it into her hand and start off loud at recent pace while I have got it fresh. I trip over a word, Mr. Marston looks up. I trip over another word, Mrs. Marston looks up. I read and tumble over half a dozen words and stop. I think my mother would show me the book if she dared, but she does not dare, and she says softly, "Oh, Davy, Davy." "Now, Clara," says Mr. Marston, "be firm with the boy. Don't say, 'Oh, Davy, Davy,' that's childish. He knows his lessons, or he does not know it." "He does not know it," Mrs. Marston interposes awfully. "I'm really afraid he does not," says my mother. "Then you see, Clara," returns Mrs. Marston, "you should just give him the book back and make him know it." "Yes, certainly," says my mother. "That is what I intend to do, my dear Jane. Now, Davy, try once more and don't be stupid."
Weak and thin and pallid, he awoke at last from what seemed to have been a long and troubled dream, feebly raising himself in the bed, with his head resting on his trembling arm. He looked anxiously around. "What room is this? Where have I been brought to?" said Oliver. "This is not the place I went to sleep in." He uttered these words in a feeble voice, being very faint and weak, but they were overheard at once. The curtain at the bed's head was hastily drawn back, and a motherly old lady, very neatly and precisely dressed, rose from an armchair close by, in which she had been sitting at needlework. "Hush, my dear," said the old lady softly. "You must be very quiet, or you will be ill again, and you have been very bad as bad could be, pretty nigh. Lie down again, there is a dear." With those words, the old lady very gently placed Oliver's head upon the pillow, and smoothing back his hair from his forehead, looked so kindly and loving in his face, that he could not help placing his little hand in his, and drawing it round his neck. "Save us," said the old lady with tears in her eyes. "What a grateful little dear it is, pretty creature! What would his mother feel if she had sat by him as I have, and could see him now?" "Perhaps she does see me," whispered Oliver, folding his hands together. "Perhaps she has sat by me, I almost feel as if she had. That was the fever, my dear, said the old lady mildly. I suppose it was, replied Oliver, because heaven is a long way off, and they are too happy there to come down to the bedside of a poor boy. But if she knew I was ill, she must have pitied me, for she was very ill herself before she died. She can't know anything about me, added Oliver after a moment's silence. And her face has always looked sweet and happy when I have dreamed of her.
Кривошеева Дарья, учащаяся 9 класса муниципального бюджетного общеобразовательного учреждения города Горловки, школа номер 48. Чарльз Диккенс, A Child's Hymn. Hear my prayer, O Heavenly Father, ere I lay me down to sleep. Bid thy angels pure and holy, round my bed thy vigil keep. My sins are heavy, but thy mercy for outweighs them every one. Down before thy trust I cast them, trusting in thy help alone. Keep me through this night of peril, underneath its bodiless shade. Take me to Cyrus, I pray thee, when my pilgrimage is made. None shall measure outside patience, bear the spans of human thought. None shall bond the tender mercies which the holy Son has brought. Pardon all me past transgressions, give me strength for days to come. Guide me thy blessing, till thy angels meet me